The grand chamber of the Galactic Council stretched across 300 meters of polished crystal flooring. Representatives from 47 different species sat in their designated sections, each area designed to accommodate their unique physiologies. Some breathed methane, others required intense heat, and a few existed partially out of phase with normal space. But they all understood one universal language. Power. Minho Park stood at the human podium, his dark suit a stark contrast to the elaborate robes and armored carapaces worn by the other ambassadors. He was 43 years old, with gray streaking his black hair and deep lines around his eyes. Those lines had appeared over the past 3 months, ever since the incident that changed everything. Across the chamber, the Valkyrie delegation occupied the largest space. They were massive beings, each standing nearly 3 meters tall, with 4 arms ending in clawed hands and faces that resembled a cross, between a reptile and something from Earth's ancient nightmares. Their scales shimmered with an iridescent purple, and their eyes glowed with an inner light that spoke of contempt for everything around them. Supreme Overlord Threxus rose from his throne. When he spoke, his voice boomed through translation devices implanted in every ambassador's ear. The Valkyrie Empire has been patient with the human infestation. You have spread across 12 worlds beyond your home system. This is unacceptable. Lesser species do not claim territory without permission from their betters. Minho remained perfectly still, his face showing no emotion. Around the chamber, other species watched with mixed expressions. Some showed pity for humanity. Others displayed barely concealed satisfaction. The Valkyrie had ruled this sector of space for over a century, crushing anyone who opposed them. "We offer you a choice," Threxus continued. His 4 arms spread wide in a gesture that might have been magnanimous in his culture. "Abandon all colonies beyond your birth world. Return to your single planet. Accept Valkyrie oversight of your military and technology. Do this, and your species may continue to exist." "And if we refuse?" Minho asked quietly. Threxus laughed, a sound like rocks grinding together. "Then we will provide corrective military action. Your primitive warships will burn. Your colonies will be occupied. Your people will learn their proper place in the galactic order. We have done this 47 times before. It takes us approximately 3 months to subdue a rebellious species completely." The Valkyrie delegation joined their leader in laughter. Several other species shifted uncomfortably. Everyone knew what Valkyrie subjugation meant. Slavery for the lucky ones. Extinction for those who resisted too strongly. Minho looked down at his data pad. On its surface, he could see a list of names. 2,000 names. Men, women, and children who had been living on Research Station Mendel, orbiting a gas giant in the Tau Ceti system. 3 months ago, a Valkyrie patrol had encountered the station during what they called a survey mission. The station commander had welcomed them, offered to share research data, and provided hospitality. The Valkyrie had responded by destroying the station completely. They claimed it was in their territory, despite the station being in a system humans had settled for 15 years. When Earth demanded answers, the Valkyrie said the deaths were justified because humans needed to learn boundaries. Among those 2,000 names was Minho's daughter. She had been 26 years old, a biologist studying deep space organisms. The last message she sent said she had discovered something incredible and couldn't wait to show him. "You give us 7 days to decide," Minho said, looking up from the datapad. 7 days? Threxus seemed amused. "Very well. 7 of your Earth days. Return here with your species surrender, or we begin the corrective action. I am generous today because watching you beg will be entertaining." Minho nodded slowly. 7 days. "Thank you for your generosity, Supreme Overlord." The session ended. As ambassadors filed out through various exits suited to their biology, Minho walked alone down a long corridor. His earpiece crackled to life. "Ambassador Park," a woman's voice said. "This is Admiral Dan Choi. I'm currently aboard the Indomitable near Mars. Did they accept the timeline?" "Yes, Admiral," Minho replied softly. 7 days exactly as planned. "Excellent." We'll be ready. How many ships do we have positioned now? Everything, Ambassador. Every single warship humanity has built over the past 3 months. 300 capital ships, 800 destroyers, 2,000 fighters, and the special projects. Minho paused at a window overlooking the station's massive docking bay. He could see ships from dozens of species coming and going. And the swarm protocol? Production facilities on Luna, Mars, and Titan have been running at maximum capacity since the incident. We have enough units to darken their skies. The Valkyrie think we're weak because we've always chosen diplomacy, Minho said. They're about to learn that we chose diplomacy because we're strong enough to do so, Admiral Troy replied. Every species they've conquered, they did it through surprise and overwhelming force. They've never faced a species that was ready for them. Minho touched the window, his reflection staring back at him. In 72 hours, Operation Righteous Fury begins. Commander Hyunwoo Kim's Special Forces teams are already in position near Valkyrie supply lines. Chief Science Officer Jiwon Lee has confirmed that their shields are vulnerable to concentrated railgun fire. Strategic Coordinator Sun Ho-yoon has run the scenarios 8,000 times. We win every single one. There's something else, Ambassador, Admiral Troy said, her voice uncertain. Some of the other Council species have been sending us quiet messages. They're asking if we need help? Species the Valkyrie have terrorized for decades. They want to know if this is real, if someone is finally going to stop them. Tell them to stay out of it, Minho said. This is between humanity and the Valkyrie. We don't want their blood on our hands. But tell them to watch. Tell them to see what happens when you murder our children and think we'll just accept it. Understood, sir. Minho ended the transmission and continued walking. He had one more stop to make before returning to Earth. Deep in the civilian section of Avalon Prime, there was a memorial garden. He visited it every time he came to the station. The garden was quiet, filled with plants from 100 different worlds. In the center stood a simple stone monument with names carved into it. These were the names of beings who had died far from home, remembered by those who loved them. Minho knelt in front of the section reserved for human names. He traced his daughter's name with one finger. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you, he whispered. But I promise you, they will understand what they've done. Every species that has ever looked at Earth and thought we were easy prey will learn the truth. We are not warriors by nature, but we can become whatever we need to be. He stood, straightened his suit, and walked back toward the diplomatic shuttles. In 7 days, he would return to this chamber. In 7 days, the Valkyrie Empire would begin to fall. They just didn't know it yet. The galaxy was about to learn a fundamental truth about humanity. They had mistaken patience for weakness, diplomacy for fear, and that mistake would cost them everything. The Valkyrie First Fleet emerged from hyperspace like a swarm of metallic locusts. 3,000 warships of various classes formed a wall of steel and weapons that stretched across space near Proxima Centauri. Fleet Commander Zoltros stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominance, surveying the human colony world that floated peacefully ahead. Scan for defenses, Zoltros ordered. His tactical officer worked quickly at their station. Commander, I'm detecting no orbital platforms, no defensive satellites, no military vessels of any kind. The planet appears completely undefended. Zoltros felt a surge of satisfaction. They've already run. Cowards, send half the fleet to secure the planet. The other half will spread out and search for their fleeing ships. We'll capture them, put them in chains, and parade them before the Council. The Valkyrie fleet split smoothly, practiced from 100 conquests. Ships began moving into position around Proxima Centauri. Some descended toward the planet's surface. Others spread out into the outer system, searching on Earth. In a command center buried 3 kilometers beneath the surface of Colorado, Sun Ho-yoon watched multiple displays showing the Valkyrie positions. He was a thin man in his 50s, with glasses that reflected the glow of dozens of screens. Around him, hundreds of officers monitored every aspect of the battle that was about to begin. They've taken the bait perfectly, Sun Ho said calmly. All ships are in position. Confirmed, an officer replied. Admiral Choi reports the fleet is ready. Commander Yunwoo Kim confirms special operations teams have infiltrated 3 Valkyrie command ships. All weapon platforms are online and hidden. Sun Ho touched a control. Admiral, you may begin Operation Righteous Fury. In orbit around Proxima Centauri, space itself seemed to shimmer. What the Valkyrie had thought was empty void suddenly came alive. Hundreds of weapons platforms that had been using advanced stealth technology deactivated their camouflage. They had been there all along, silent and waiting. The platforms opened fire simultaneously. Railguns accelerated tungsten projectiles to a significant fraction of light speed. At those velocities, the projectiles struck with the force of small nuclear weapons. Missiles launched by the thousands, each one guided by advanced AI that could predict and react to enemy movements faster than any biological pilot. The first wave of Valkyrie ships never knew what hit them. 300 vessels simply ceased to exist in the first 10 seconds. Their shields, designed to stop energy weapons, did almost nothing against solid projectiles moving at such incredible speeds. What is happening? Zoltros screamed at his tactical officer. Where did they come from? Unknown, Commander. The projectiles are too fast to track. We're detecting massive magnetic signatures consistent with railgun technology, but the power levels are impossible. No species has weapons this powerful. Another 100 Valkyrie ships exploded. Then the human fleet arrived. They didn't emerge from hyperspace in the slow, predictable way the Valkyrie had. Human ships appeared in multiple locations simultaneously, their new jump drives allowing pinpoint accuracy. Admiral Daeon Choi stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, watching her tactical display with cold satisfaction. All ships, execute pattern Theta, she ordered. Target their command vessels first. Kill the head and the body dies. The Indomitable was humanity's newest warship, built entirely in the 3 months since the Mendel Station massacre. It was smaller than the Valkyrie dreadnoughts, but infinitely more advanced. Its weapons weren't designed for show or intimidation. They were designed to kill efficiently. Daeon was 51 years old, and had spent 30 years in the Earth Defense Fleet. She had never expected to see real combat. Humanity had been peaceful for generations. But when they brought her the plans for these new weapons, when they asked if she would lead the fleet if war came, she had said yes without hesitation. The human fleet moved like a school of fish, each ship perfectly coordinated with the others. They used the asteroid field around Proxima Centauri as cover and as weapons. Precision shots sent asteroids tumbling toward Valkyrie ships, forcing them to break formation. When they broke formation, they became easy targets inside 3 Valkyrie command ships. Commander Yunwoo Kim and his special operations teams went to work. They had infiltrated days earlier, hiding in cargo sections, waiting for this moment. Now they moved through the ships like ghosts, placing explosive charges on critical systems and sabotaging navigation. Hyunwoo was 38, a career soldier who specialized in impossible missions. He pressed a detonator as his team reached an escape pod. The charges went off throughout the ship, destroying power relays and shield generators. Around him, the Valkyrie crew panicked as their systems failed. Team Alpha, extraction complete, he reported calmly. Target neutralized. Moving to Target 2. On the Eternal Dominance, Zoltros watched his fleet falling apart. In 20 minutes, he had lost 800 ships. 800! His mind couldn't process it. The humans were supposed to be weak, primitive, easy to crush. All ships, retreat to formation, he ordered. Concentrate fire. We still outnumber them. But the Valkyrie ships were designed for straightforward combat. They relied on heavy armor and powerful energy weapons. They had never faced an enemy that used physics itself as a weapon, that struck from unexpected angles, that seemed to predict every move aboard the Indomitable. Chief Science Officer Ji-won Lee monitored the battle with clinical precision. She was 29 years old, a genius who had helped design the new human weapons. She had studied every recorded Valkyrie battle for the past 3 months, analyzing their tactics, finding their weaknesses. Admiral, they're trying to regroup, Ji-won reported. but they're using formation pattern 7, which leaves their flanks vulnerable. If we strike from coordinates 334 Mark 17, we can collapse their entire defensive line. Excellent work, Chief. All ships. New target coordinates incoming. The human fleet struck like a surgical knife. The Valkyrie tried to respond, but their ships were too slow, too predictable. Every formation they tried had been studied, analyzed, and countered. It was like fighting someone who knew every move before you made it. After 3 hours, Zoltros sent an emergency transmission to the Valkyrie homeworld. His voice shook. This is Fleet Commander Zoltros. The First Fleet has engaged human forces at Proxima Centauri. We have lost over 2,000 ships. Repeat, over 2,000 ships. Request immediate reinforcements. The humans are not what intelligence reported. They fight like nothing we've encountered. Their weapons are decades ahead of ours. They knew we were coming and prepared a trap. He paused, looking at his tactical display. Only 800 ships remained from his original 3,000. And the humans were still attacking, still coordinating perfectly, still killing his ships one by one. They're not fighting to defend a planet, Zoltros said slowly, realization dawning. They're fighting to kill us all? Send this message to the homeworld. The humans are not prey. They're predators, and we just made ourselves the target. The transmission ended. The Eternal Dominance shuddered as railgun slugs hammered its shields. Zoltros knew he would not survive this battle. None of them would. On Earth, in the command center, Sun Ho-Yoon watched the tactical display. The Valkyrie fleet was broken, scattered, dying. He felt no joy, no satisfaction, only a cold certainty that this was necessary. Casualties? He asked quietly. 17 ships damaged, 3 destroyed. Approximately 400 personnel lost. Sun Ho nodded. 400 lives. Each one precious, each one a tragedy. But the Valkyrie had killed 2,000 civilians without hesitation. And they had intended to enslave all of humanity. Continue the operation, he said. Leave no Valkyrie warships functional. Disable those that surrender. Destroy those that resist. And prepare for the next phase. They'll send more fleets. We'll destroy those too. As many as it takes until they understand what they've done. The battle continued. By the time the sun rose over Colorado, the Valkyrie First Fleet had ceased to exist. Only a handful of damaged ships remained, their crews surrendering. The space around Proxima Centauri was filled with debris and the frozen bodies of Valkyrie. Warriors who had expected an easy victory. The galaxy was receiving the transmissions. Species across known space watched in shock as humanity revealed what they had been hiding. The diplomats, the peaceful explorers, the friendly traders had been preparing for war the entire time. And when war came, they had been ready. Admiral Daeon Choi looked out at the wreckage and felt old beyond her years. Signal all ships. Well done. Return to rally points and prepare for the next engagement. This was just the beginning. The message humanity was sending to the galaxy was clear. They had tried peace. Now they would show everyone what happened when you forced them to choose war. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened 12 hours after the Battle of Proxima Centauri. Ambassadors who usually maintained careful diplomatic facades now openly showed fear. The chamber buzzed with dozens of different languages, all saying the same thing. Humanity had been hiding its true strength all along. Minho Park entered the chamber alone. Every eye turned toward him. Some species looked at him with newfound respect, others with terror. The Valkyrie delegation was notably smaller now. Only 3 representatives instead of the usual dozen. The Valkyrie First Fleet has been destroyed, announced the council speaker. A methane-breathing being whose translator gave them a hollow, echoing voice. 3,000 warships reduced to fewer than 50 survivors in less than 6 hours. This represents the single greatest military defeat in recorded galactic history. Minho took his place at the human podium. He said nothing, merely stood and waited, a representative from the Karate Collective. A species of small, furred beings spoke up nervously. Ambassador Park, we must understand. Does humanity intend to become conquerors? Will you now impose your will on the rest of us as the Valkyrie have done? No, Minho replied simply. We want what we have always wanted. To be left alone to live in peace. We will not conquer anyone. But we will defend ourselves and those who cannot defend themselves. The new senior Valkyrie representative, a scarred warrior named Draxus, stood. His voice dripped with barely controlled rage. You murdered 3,000 warriors. You murdered 2,000 civilians, Minho replied calmly. Men, women, and children who welcomed your warriors with hospitality. They were scientists, teachers, families. They had no weapons. And your warriors destroyed them without mercy or hesitation. That station was in our territory. That station was in a system humanity settled 15 years before your scouts ever entered that sector. We have the records, the timestamps, the proof. You decided the station was in your way, so you destroyed it. And when we asked for justice, you laughed and threatened us with extinction. Draxus snarled but said nothing. Everyone in the chamber knew the truth. The Valkyrie had grown arrogant through a century of easy conquests. The Valkyrie Empire is mobilizing our second and third fleets, Draxus finally said. 10,000 additional warships. You may have won one battle through trickery and ambush, but you cannot stand against the full might of our empire. Minho looked at the Valkyrie representative for a long moment. Then you have learned nothing. We will destroy those fleets as well. As many as you send, until you cannot send any more. The chamber erupted in shocked whispers. Minho continued, his voice cutting through the noise. For centuries, humanity has chosen peace because we believed civilized species could coexist. We offered friendship to everyone we met. We shared our technology, our culture, our resources. And when the Valkyrie came, we tried diplomacy first. Always first. He paused, touching his datapad. Images appeared on the chamber's central display. The Mendel station before its destruction. Smiling families. Children playing. Scientists working together. These are the people you killed, Minho said quietly. Not soldiers. Not warriors. Just people living their lives. You killed them to send us a message. Now we're sending you one. The images changed. The Battle of Proxima Centauri played out in brutal detail. Valkyrie ships exploding. The precise, devastating efficiency of human weapons. The complete tactical superiority of the human fleet. This is what happens when you force peaceful people to become warriors, Minho said. We prepared for war while hoping for peace. We built weapons we prayed we would never use. And when you gave us no choice, we used them without hesitation. 2 weeks later, the Valkyrie second and third fleets entered the Alpha Centauri system. They had learned from the first fleet's mistakes. They stayed in tight formation, shields overlapping. They swept space ahead of them with powerful sensors. Looking for hidden platforms. War matriarch Velena commanded the combined fleets from her flagship. The unyielding Storm, she was ancient by Valkyrie standards, having led military campaigns for 70 years. She had conquered 15 species personally. She did not underestimate the humans as Ultros had. Deploy the scout drones, she ordered. Map every asteroid, every piece of debris. If they have hidden weapons, find them. The Valkyrie fleet moved slowly, carefully. And for 3 days, they encountered nothing. No human ships appeared. No hidden platforms opened fire. The system seemed empty. Where are they? Velena's second-in-command asked nervously. Then the swarm came. They started as tiny dots on the sensors. Hundreds of them. Then thousands. Then millions. Small objects moving at high speed, each one barely larger than a human fist. The Valkyrie weapons officers tried to target them, but there were too many and they moved too fast. The first wave hit the outermost Valkyrie ships. Each small object was an autonomous combat drone, guided by sophisticated AI. Individually, they couldn't damage a warship. But they didn't attack individually. They attacked in coordinated swarms of thousands, overwhelming shields through sheer numbers, then burrowing into hull plating and detonating. "All ships, point defense to maximum," Velena ordered. "Destroy those drones." But the Valkyrie point defense systems were designed to stop large missiles and torpedoes. The drones were too small, too numerous, too fast. For every 100 destroyed, 1,000 more appeared. The production facilities on Luna, Mars, and Titan had been building them continuously for 3 months. Humanity had prepared an endless supply, and while the Valkyrie struggled against the swarm, the human fleet attacked. Admiral Daeon Choi led the assault personally. The Indomitable emerged from behind a gas giant along with 300 other capital ships. They struck the Valkyrie formation at its weakest point, the section most damaged by the drone swarm aboard the Indomitable. Commander Sora Kong prepared her Marines for boarding action. She was 34 years old, muscular, and scarred from a dozen training accidents. She had never seen real combat before 3 weeks ago. Now she was about to lead an assault on a Valkyrie dreadnought. "Listen up," she told her team over the comm system. "The Valkyrie are bigger than us, stronger than us. But we're smarter and we're angrier. They killed our people thinking we wouldn't fight back. Let's show them how wrong they were." The boarding pods launched. Small, armored capsules carrying teams of Marines accelerated toward damaged Valkyrie ships. Point defense systems tried to shoot them down. But the drones kept the Valkyrie weapons busy. Sora's pod smashed through the hull of the Valkyrie. Battlecruiser Crimson Fang. The impact was brutal, but her armor absorbed most of it. The pod's front blew open and she charged out. Rifle ready, the Valkyrie defenders were waiting, but they were adapted for different tactics. They expected ship-to-ship combat, not boarding actions. Human Marines moved fast, using their smaller size to maneuver through corridors designed for beings twice their height. They had studied Valkyrie ship layouts for months. They knew every weak point, every critical system. Sora's team fought through 3 decks, pushing toward the engineering section. Valkyrie warriors fell to precise rifle fire and well-placed explosives. Within 30 minutes, they had control of the ship's power systems. "Engineering secured," Sora reported, shutting down weapons and shields. "This one's ours." Across the battlefield, similar actions played out. Human special operations teams, led by Commander Yunwoo Kim, had been planting infiltration teams on Valkyrie supply ships for weeks. Those teams now activated, sabotaging ships from within just as the external attack began on Earth. Taijin Han worked in a dark room filled with quantum computers. He was 26 years old, a cyber warfare specialist who had been recruited straight from university when the war began. His fingers flew across holographic keyboards as he penetrated Valkyrie communication networks. "Got it," he muttered. "Their fleet coordination runs through quantum-entangled communication nodes. Standard encryption, completely outdated. I can spoof command signals." He sent false orders to entire sections of the Valkyrie fleet. Ships received commands to adjust formation, to target specific coordinates, to redirect power. By the time the Valkyrie realized what was happening, 30 ships had been turned against their own fleet by nothing more than corrupted command codes. War. Matriarch Velena watched her fleets disintegrate with growing horror. This wasn't battle. This was systematic destruction. The humans attacked from every angle at once, coordinating perfectly, exploiting every weakness. Their drones kept her ships off balance. Their warships struck with surgical precision. Their boarding teams captured vessels instead of destroying them. And somehow, impossibly, they had hacked into Valkyrie military networks that were supposed to be unhackable. "How many ships have we lost?" she asked quietly. 3,700, her tactical officer replied, voice shaking. "In 4 hours." Velena slumped in her command chair. She had led the Valkyrie military for decades. She had seen 100 battles, and she finally understood what Zoltros had meant in his dying transmission. The humans weren't just fighting to win battles. They were fighting to break the Valkyrie completely. A communication came through from the Indomitable. Admiral Daeon Choi's face appeared on the display. She looked tired, older than her years, but her eyes were hard as steel. 6 months had passed since the destruction of the Valkyrie Second and Third Fleets. The war that the Valkyrie thought would last 3 months and end with humanity's submission had instead turned into their worst nightmare. Human forces had pushed deep into Valkyrie territory, liberating world after world that the Empire had conquered over the past century. Commander Ji-Hun-on stood on the bridge of the siege flagship Steadfast, staring at the blue-green planet that hung in space before him. This was the Valkyrie homeworld, capital of an empire that had once seemed invincible. Now it was surrounded by 300 human warships. Cut off from the galaxy, slowly starving, Ji-Hun was 47 years old, a career officer who had spent most of his life in peaceful exploration. He never imagined he would command a siege fleet. He never wanted to. But someone had to make sure the Valkyrie could never threaten anyone again. Status report, he said quietly. His tactical officer looked up from her console. All orbital approaches remain secure. No ships in or out for 4 months now. Surface scans show food production is failing. Their cities are going dark section by section as power reserves deplete. Population centers show signs of civil unrest. Ji-Hun nodded. They weren't bombing the planet. They weren't killing civilians. They were simply ensuring that the Valkyrie government could not continue the war. Food could be produced on the planet, but the Valkyrie had relied on imports from their conquered worlds for generations. Those worlds were now free, and none of them were sending supplies on the planet below. In the capital city of Valkara Prime, Supreme Overlord Threxus paced in his throne room. The chamber that once held hundreds of subordinates now contained only a handful of loyalists. The rest had fled or joined the growing rebellion. How many ships remain in our entire fleet? Threxus demanded. His military advisor, an old warrior named Krentos, consulted a datapad. Fewer than 200, Overlord. Scattered across 36 systems. All damaged. Most are hiding, unable to move without detection by human monitoring systems. Threxus slammed one of his 4 fists on a table. This is impossible. We had 15,000 warships. We ruled 47 species. How did these primitive humans destroy us so completely? Krentos said nothing. Everyone knew the answer. The Valkyrie had underestimated humanity. They had mistaken kindness for weakness, diplomacy for fear. And when the humans finally revealed their true capabilities, it was already too late. The population is rioting, another advisor said nervously. They know we're losing. They know the humans have freed every world we conquered. They're demanding we surrender. Never. Threxus roared. The Valkyrie Empire does not surrender to prey species. But elsewhere in the galaxy, the Valkyrie Empire was already falling apart. On the planet Theraxis V, one of the first worlds the Valkyrie had conquered 60 years ago, the native population watched in awe as human ships entered orbit. Minji Bey, a diplomatic corps officer, stood in the capital city square as thousands gathered to see the humans who had freed them. Minji was 28 years old, trained as a negotiator and cultural liaison. She had spent the past 6 months traveling to liberated worlds, helping them rebuild. Each world told the same story. The Valkyrie had come, conquered, enslaved. Many species had been worked nearly to extinction. Some had been completely wiped out when they resisted too strongly. Why did you come? Asked the Theraxis elder, a being whose species resembled large, intelligent cats. Why do humans care about species they have never met? Minji looked at the elder, at the scars that covered his fur, marks of decades of slavery. Because the same thing happened to us, she said. The Valkyrie attacked us, killed our people, thought we would just accept it. We fought back not just for ourselves, but for everyone they hurt. No species should live under the heel of oppressors. The elder's eyes filled with tears. Will you rule us now? Have we simply traded one master for another? No, Minji said firmly. Your world is yours. We'll help you rebuild if you want our help. We'll trade with you if you want to trade. We'll protect you if someone threatens you. But we won't rule you. That's not why we fought this war. Across the liberated territories, similar scenes played out. Human aid workers helped rebuild infrastructure. Human engineers shared technology. Human medical teams treated populations that had been neglected by Valkyrie overseers. And everywhere they went, humans asked freed species to share their stories. Those stories were horrific. The Valkyrie had not been merely conquerors. They had been cruel masters who viewed other species as tools or toys. On some worlds, they had conducted biological experiments. On others, they had simply worked populations to death and moved on. Jiwan Li, now promoted to Chief of Naval Intelligence, compiled all the evidence. She was aboard the Indomitable, still serving under Admiral Daeun Choi. The data she gathered made her physically ill. "Admiral, you need to see this," Jiwan said, pulling up files on the command display. "We've confirmed that the Valkyrie completely exterminated 12 sentient species. Not conquered, exterminated, when those species resisted too effectively. The Valkyrie used biological weapons to sterilize entire planets." Dan Choi stared at the evidence, her face growing hard. 12 species. Billions of beings. Gone because the Valkyrie decided they were inconvenient. "There's more," Jiwan continued. "The Valkyrie kept extensive records. They were proud of these genocides. They saw them as demonstrations of power. They broadcast footage to other species as warnings." Daeun stood and walked to the viewport, looking out at the stars. "Then we made the right choice. The Valkyrie government cannot be allowed to continue. Ever. But we need to make sure the galaxy understands why. Broadcast all of it. Every crime. Every genocide. Let everyone see what the Valkyrie Empire truly was. On Earth." Taijin Han worked with a team of communication specialists to spread the evidence across every network in known space. Within days, billions of beings across hundreds of worlds saw the truth. The Valkyrie had not been strong leaders maintaining order. They had been monsters wearing the mask of civilization. The impact was immediate. Species that had remained neutral suddenly declared support for humanity. Former Valkyrie client states renounced all treaties. And on the Valkyrie homeworld, the population finally understood what their government had done in their name. Commander Yunwoo Kim led a special operation to extract Valkyrie dissidents from the homeworld. His team moved through the capital city at night, making contact with resistance groups who opposed Threxus and wanted the war to end. "How many can you get out?" asked one dissident, a young Valkyrie female named Shatara, who had been secretly working against her government for years. "Everyone who wants to come," Yunwoo replied. "We're not your enemy. Your government is. We'll protect anyone who opposes these genocidal policies." "Why should we trust you?" another dissident asked. "You've destroyed our fleets, sieged our world." Yunwoo looked at them steadily. "Because if we wanted you all dead, you would be. We could have bombarded your planet from orbit. We didn't. We could have used biological weapons like your government did. We didn't. We're giving you a chance to build something better." The extraction operation pulled out 3,000 Valkyrie dissidents over the course of a week. They were transported to neutral stations where they began broadcasting to their homeworld, calling for Threxus to step down and for the Valkyrie people to accept peace. The pressure on Threxus mounted. Food shortages worsened. Power failures increased. The human siege remained unbreakable. And now his own people were turning against him. Finally, after 6 months of siege, the inevitable happened. Threxus's own military commanders arrested him. They contacted the human fleet with an offer of unconditional surrender, Jehun, received the transmission on the Steadfast. The new Valkyrie leader, War Matriarch Velena herself, appeared on screen. She looked haggard, broken. "Commander On," she said. "The Valkyrie Empire surrenders unconditionally. We accept all terms humanity wishes to impose. We ask only that you allow food and medicine to reach our people. They have suffered enough for the crimes of leaders like Threxus." Jehun considered her words carefully. "The siege will be lifted. Food and medical supplies will be provided immediately. But the Valkyrie military must be completely disbanded. All war criminals will face trial. And the Valkyrie people must acknowledge what their empire did and commit to never doing it again." We agree, Velena said quietly. We agree to everything. The Valkyrie Empire is finished. We only hope to survive as a species and someday earn forgiveness for what we have done. Aboard the Indomitable, Admiral Daeon Choi received the news of surrender. She had been in command of the fleet for 6 months of continuous warfare. She felt exhausted beyond words. What do we do now? Her executive officer asked. Daeon thought about the question. What did humanity do now? They had won a war they never wanted. They had defeated an empire that had terrorized the galaxy for a century. And in doing so, they had revealed themselves as the most powerful military force in known space. Now, she said slowly, we make sure this never happens again. We help the freed species rebuild. We ensure the Valkyrie can never restart their empire. And we show the galaxy that power can be used for protection instead of conquest. 1 year after the end of the war, the Galactic Council chamber looked very different. Where the Valkyrie delegation once occupied the largest space, now sat representatives from a dozen species that had been freed from their empire. The chamber had been expanded to accommodate 30 new member species, all of whom had one thing in common. They owed their freedom to humanity. Minho Park walked to the human podium for what would be his final address as ambassador. He was 55 now, and the past year had aged him far beyond that. Gray covered his entire head, and new lines marked his face. But his eyes remained sharp, focused, determined. Members of the Galactic Council, he began. 1 year ago, humanity was forced to make a choice. Accept subjugation or fight for our freedom. We chose to fight. And in fighting, we discovered that many other species had been suffering under Valkyrie tyranny for generations. Around the chamber, representatives listened in complete silence. The human voice now commanded absolute attention. Not because of threats or intimidation, but because humanity had proven itself capable of following through on its promises. The Valkyrie Empire is no more, Minho continued. Their military has been disbanded. Their territory has been partitioned into 43 independent worlds, each governed by its native population. War criminals have been tried and punished according to laws that all council species agreed upon. The Valkyrie people themselves are beginning the long process of acknowledging what their government did in rebuilding their society. He paused, looking at the Valkyrie representatives. There were only 3 now, elected by their population rather than appointed by an emperor. They looked ashamed, and Minho felt no satisfaction in that shame, only sadness for the waste of it all. But this address is not about the past. It's about the future. Humanity did not fight this war to become conquerors. We fought because we had no choice. And now that the fighting is done, we want to return to what we value most: peaceful exploration, cultural exchange, and cooperation. A murmur ran through the chamber. Some species clearly didn't believe him. Others looked hopeful. However, Minho said, his voice hardening, we will not allow another Valkyrie empire to rise. To that end, humanity proposes the formation of a Sentinel network, a coalition of species dedicated to preventing genocide, stopping tyranny, and protecting those who cannot protect themselves. Any species that targets civilians, that commits acts of genocide, or that attempts to build an empire through conquest will face immediate intervention. The chamber erupted in discussion. The council speaker called for order. When silence returned, the karate representative spoke up. Ambassador Park, are you saying humanity will enforce these rules? That you will act as galactic police? Not humanity alone, Minho replied. The Sentinel network will be composed of any species that wishes to participate. Humanity will contribute our military and technology, but this must be a shared responsibility. We invite all peaceful species to join us. Together, we can ensure that what happened to those 12 exterminated species never happens again. Over the next 6 months, 40 species joined the Sentinel network. It was commanded by a joint council with representatives from each member species, but everyone knew humanity provided the backbone of its military power. The galaxy had a new order, one built not on conquest but on mutual protection. Admiral Daeon Choi did not see the Sentinel network's formation. She had retired 6 months after the war ended, returning to Earth to a small house in the countryside. She was only 52, still young by military standards. But the war had exhausted her in ways that went beyond physical tiredness. She spent her days gardening and writing. Her memoir of the war became required reading at military academies across human space. In it, she wrote honestly about the cost of victory, the thousands of human lives lost, the tens of thousands of Valkyrie killed, the moral weight of ordering attacks that she knew would result in death. War is not glorious, she wrote. It is necessary only when all other options are exhausted. We won because we prepared. We survived because we fought smart rather than hard. But winning a war does not make the nightmares stop. Every commander must carry the weight of the orders they gave. That weight never gets lighter. She received visitors occasionally, young officers seeking advice, diplomats asking about the war. She told them all the same thing: never start a war. But if someone forces you to fight, make sure you end it completely. Commander Yunwoo Kim took a different path. He accepted a position training security forces for the Sentinel Network. He traveled from world to world, teaching newly freed species how to defend themselves. Many of them had been subjugated for so long they had forgotten how to fight back on the planet Theraxis 5. He stood before a class of young recruits from a dozen different species. They looked at him with awe. He was a legend, the human who had infiltrated Valkyrie ships and turned their own forces against them. Fighting is a last resort, he told them. But you must know how to fight, or you will always be vulnerable to those who do. The Valkyrie conquered your worlds because you weren't prepared. That will never happen again if you take your training seriously. One recruit, a young Theraxis female, raised her hand. Why did humans help us? You didn't know us. We had nothing to offer you. Hyunwoo thought about the question. Because it was the right thing to do. Because watching oppression and doing nothing makes you complicit in that oppression. And because humanity learned something important, we're strongest when we stand together with other species, not alone. The training programs he established became models across the Sentinel network. Species that had been victims learned to become defenders, not to conquer others, but to ensure they could never be conquered again. Chief Science Officer Ji-won Lee led a different kind of mission. She headed a research initiative dedicated to ensuring humanity maintained its technological edge. The war had revealed that human innovation had surpassed most of the galaxy, but Ji-won knew that advantage could disappear if they became complacent. The Valkyrie grew arrogant, she told her research teams. They stopped innovating because no one challenged them. We will never make that mistake. We innovate constantly, not for war, but because stagnation is death. Her teams developed new medical technologies that they shared freely with other species. New energy systems that made clean power accessible to developing worlds. New agricultural techniques that ended hunger on planets that had struggled for generations. Humanity's technological gifts were not weapons, but tools for building better societies. Strategic. Coordinator Sun Ho-yoon became the architect of the Sentinel network's early warning systems. He designed a galaxy-wide monitoring network that could detect brewing conflicts before they escalated into wars. His systems watched for signs of genocide, slavery, or aggressive military buildups. Prevention is better than intervention, he wrote in his operational guidelines. If we can identify potential tyrants before they gain power, we can stop them through diplomatic and economic pressure. Military force should be our last option, not our first. And the monitoring systems worked. In the first year alone, they identified and stopped 3 separate attempts by minor warlords to establish empires through conquest. The Sentinel network intervened with overwhelming force, dismantled the would-be conquerors' militaries, and established democratic governments. The message was clear: the age of empire building was over. Minji Bay continued her work with liberated species, but her role evolved. She became humanity's chief cultural liaison, helping different species understand human motivations and helping humans understand alien perspectives. She wrote a book called Building Bridges, Not Empires, that became a bestseller across 50 worlds. In it, she discussed the challenge humanity faced. "We are the most powerful military force in the galaxy," she wrote. "This power could corrupt us, turn us into the very thing we fought against. We must constantly remind ourselves why we fought. Not for glory or territory, but for the simple right of peaceful species to exist without fear." On the Valkyrie homeworld, the past year had been one of painful transformation. The planet's new government, led by reformed leaders like Shatara and overseen by Sentinel observers, worked to dismantle the imperial system completely. War matriarch Velena had been tried for her role in Valkyrie conquests. The trial was fair, conducted according to laws the Valkyrie themselves acknowledged. She was found guilty of war crimes and sentenced to life imprisonment. She accepted the sentence without appeal. "I was a soldier," she said during her sentencing. "I followed orders. But that is not an excuse. I should have questioned those orders. I should have refused to participate in genocide. My punishment is just, and I hope my people learn from my failures." The Valkyrie people struggled with their collective guilt. Schools now taught the true history of their empire. Children learned about the 12 species their government had exterminated, about the slavery and oppression, about the arrogance that led to their complete defeat. Some Valkyrie couldn't accept it. They left the homeworld, forming small, isolated communities that insisted the empire had been right. But most Valkyrie chose to acknowledge the truth and work toward redemption. Minho Pak made one final visit to the Valkyrie homeworld before stepping down as ambassador.